He was the kind of man who owned the city a phantom in tailored suits. I was just Clara, the quiet, overweight bookkeeper in apartment 4B. But at 2 a.m., he didn't go to his penthouse. Bleeding, reeking of bourbon, the deadliest man in Chicago collapsed against my door. I have never been the girl who gets the guy. I've always been the girl who balances the books, bakes the apology cupcakes, and blends into the beige wallpaper of my corporate office. At 29, I am a solid size 22. I have thick thighs that chafe in the summer, a soft belly that I spend entirely too much time trying to hide under empire waist dresses, and a face that people politely call sweet. Men don't cross crowded rooms for me. They certainly don't bleed out on my doorstep. It was a Tuesday night in late November. The Chicago wind was howling off Lake Michigan, rattling the single-pane windows of my Logan Square apartment. I was sitting on my worn-out velvet sofa, in oversized flannel pajamas, eating a bowl of cold mac and cheese, and reviewing some incredibly messy ledgers for my firm, Miller & Hayes Accounting. Then the knocking started. It wasn't a polite tap. It was a frantic, heavy thudding, accompanied by a low, guttural groan that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I froze my spoon halfway to my mouth. I checked the peephole. My breath caught in my throat. It was Gabriel Rossi. Everyone in the city knew who Gabriel Rossi was, even if they pretended they didn't. He was the heir to the Rossi Syndicate, a man whose legitimate front real estate and shipping barely masked the ruthless, violent empire he ran beneath it. I only knew him because he owned the building I lived in. And once, 6 months ago, he had held the elevator doors open for me when I was dropping 2 bags of groceries. He had looked at me then, really looked at me, his dark eyes trailing over my curves in a way that made my skin flush before I quickly looked away, certain he was mocking me. Now he was slumped against my doorframe, the left side of his expensive charcoal overcoat soaked in something dark and wet. I undid the deadbolt before my brain could scream at me to stop. The moment the door opened, his massive frame pitched forward. I caught him out of pure reflex, his weight crushing me against the hallway wall. He smelled like expensive cologne copper and a heavy, intoxicating wave of Kentucky bourbon. "Close it," he rasped, his voice a gravelly whisper against my ear. I kicked the door shut and locked it. "Mr. Rossi, you're bleeding. I need to call 911. His large, calloused hand clamped over my wrist. Even injured and drunk, his grip was like a steel vice. No cops, no hospitals, just you and me. My voice squeaked. "I'm an accountant. I don't know how to fix a bullet hole." "You're Clara," he muttered, his eyes fluttering as he leaned his forehead against my shoulder. The heat radiating off him was immense. "I need you, Clara." My heart hammered against my ribs. How did he know my name? I didn't have time to ask. He was slipping into unconsciousness. Gritting my teeth, I threw his good arm over my shoulders. Despite my insecurities about my weight, I am strong. I hauled his 6'2" pure muscle body across my small living room, steering him toward the bathroom. We collapsed onto the hexagonal tiles. Okay. I breathed, my hands shaking as I peeled his ruined coat off. His white dress shirt was glued to his skin with blood. "I'm going to have to cut this." "Do it," he ground out, leaning his head against the porcelain rim of the bathtub. I grabbed my fabric shears from the vanity and cut the shirt away. The gunshot wound was high on his left shoulder, a through and through, thankfully, but it was bleeding heavily. For the next hour I became a machine. I cleaned the wound with rubbing alcohol, ignoring his sharp hisses of pain, and packed it with sterile gauze, from my overly prepared first aid kit. Every time my soft hands brushed against his heavily tattooed, heavily scarred chest, my pulse spiked. He was a masterpiece of hard lines and violent history. I was a collection of soft curves and quiet evenings. We didn't belong in the same universe, let alone the same bathroom. As I taped the last piece of gauze down, I realized he was staring at me. The glassy, drunken haze in his dark eyes had sharpened into something intensely focused. "Why didn't you scream?" he asked, his voice thick. "I'm too tired to scream on a Tuesday," I said, trying to joke to cover my raging nerves. I sat back on my heels, wrapping my arms around my waist, suddenly hyper-aware of how deeply unflattering my flannel pajamas were. "Why did you come here, Gabriel? You have a penthouse. You have men. You have money." He reached out his knuckles, brushing against my knee. The contact sent a jolt of electricity straight to my core. "They were waiting for me at the penthouse," he said, his words slightly slurred but deadly serious. "And my men are the ones who shot me." A cold dread pooled in my stomach. "What? My underboss, Vincent. He bought out half my crew. I barely made it out." Gabriel's hand slid up to my thigh, his thumb resting casually on the soft, thick flesh there. He didn't pull away like it disgusted him. His grip was grounding, almost possessive. "I couldn't go to any of my safe houses. Vincent knows them all." "So you came to a random tenant's apartment?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You're not random, Clara," he whispered, his eyes heavy, as the alcohol and blood loss finally dragged him under. "I've been watching you for a long time." His eyes rolled back, and he passed out on my bathroom floor. I sat there in the silence of my apartment, my hands covered in a mafia boss's blood, staring at the man who had just blown my invisible, quiet life entirely to pieces. The smell of freshly brewed coffee woke me. For a terrifying second, my brain didn't process the anomaly. Then my eyes snapped open. I was lying in my own bed, tangled in my duvet. The last thing I remembered was dragging Gabriel's unconscious body onto my living room rug and throwing a blanket over him because I couldn't lift him onto the sofa. I scrambled out of bed, grabbing my oversized cardigan and wrapping it tightly around my body like armor. I practically tiptoed into the kitchen. Gabriel Rossi was standing at my counter. He was shirtless, the stark white bandages I had applied standing out against his tanned, tattooed skin. He had found the spare sweat pants I kept for my brother, and though they were a bit tight on him, he looked devastatingly domestic. He was holding my favorite pink mug, the one that said, "Accountants do it with balance." "You're awake," he said smoothly. The drunkenness from last night was completely gone. In its place was a lethal, quiet predator. "You're making coffee," I replied, our brain short-circuiting. "You got shot last night. You should be resting." "I heal fast." He poured a second cup and slid it across the island toward me. "Black 2 sugars." "Right." I froze my hand, hovering over the ceramic. "How do you know how I take my coffee?" Gabriel leaned against the counter, his dark, calculating eyes locking onto mine. In the daylight, the harsh reality of who we were hit me harder. He was a kingpin, a man who commanded fear. I was a fat civilian woman who panicked when the barista got my order wrong. "I know a lot about you, Clara Higgins," he said softly. "I know you work for Miller and Hayes. I know you stay late on Thursdays. I know you hate the gym, but love walking through Millennium Park. And I know that 3 days ago, you flagged a massive discrepancy in the accounts of a shell corporation called Apex Holdings." The air in my lungs vanished. Apex Holdings. It was a massive account I had been auditing. I had found nearly $4 million missing, siphoned off into offshore accounts. I had reported it to my boss, Mr. Miller, just yesterday. Apex Holdings is yours. I whispered the puzzle pieces, clicking together with terrifying speed. It's a front for the Rossi family, yes, Gabriel confirmed, taking a sip of his coffee. But I wasn't the one stealing the money. Vincent was. He's been bleeding my accounts dry to fund a coup against me. I backed up until my hips hit the refrigerator. Oh my God, I'm going to go to jail, or I'm going to be murdered. Neither. Gabriel set his mug down and closed the distance between us in 2 long strides. I instinctively shrank back, hyper-aware of my size, of how much space I took up in this tiny kitchen, but he didn't let me retreat. He placed a hand on the fridge beside my head, boxing me in. Miller told Vincent that a smart little accountant found the leak. Vincent ordered a hit on you last night. Tears pricked my eyes. What? I intercepted the call. Gabriel's voice dropped an octave rough and urgent. I went to your office to get you, but you were already gone. Vincent's men ambushed me in the parking garage. That's how I got this. He gestured to his bandaged shoulder. I managed to lose them, but I couldn't go back to my territory. I had to get to you before they did. You came here to save me. A tear spilled over my cheek. Why do you care about a random bookkeeper? Gabriel reached out his thumb, gently wiping the tear away. His gaze dropped to my lips, then trailed down my neck, lingering on the fullness of my chest and the curve of my hips, hidden beneath the chunky cardigan. There was no disgust in his eyes. There was hunger. I told you last night, you're not random to me, he murmured. 6 months ago, I watched you drop your groceries in the lobby. You were so flustered. You swore at a rolling lemon, and you had a smear of flour on your cheek. You were so real. In my world, Clara, everything is plastic and blood. You are soft. You are beautiful. I started keeping tabs on you to make sure you were safe. When I heard Vincent put a target on your back, I nearly tore the city apart. I was trembling. Gabriel, look at me. Look at my body. I'm not a mobster's girlfriend. I'm a size 22. I like baking sourdough and reading romance novels. I don't fit in your world. I don't want you to fit in my world, he said fiercely, his hand sliding to my waist, pulling my soft body flush against his hard one. I want you exactly as you are, plump, sweet, and mine. Before I could process the words, his lips crashed down on mine. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, bruising tasting of coffee and danger. For a split second, my insecurities screamed at me to push him away, to hide my stomach, to shrink myself. But the way his large hands gripped my hips, kneading my curves like they were exactly what his hands were made to hold, silenced the voices in my head. I melted into him, my fingers tangling in his dark hair. Crash! The sound of my front door splintering inward shattered the moment. Gabriel tore away from me, his romantic demeanor instantly replaced by cold, calculating violence. He shoved me behind his broad back, reaching into the waistband of his sweatpants to pull a sleek black Glock I hadn't realized he was carrying. They found us. Gabriel hissed, his eyes locked on the hallway. Heavy boots were pounding toward the kitchen. How? I panicked, grabbing a cast-iron skillet from the stove, because it was the only weapon I had. Miller must have given them your address, Gabriel said, his body tensing like a coiled spring. He glanced over his shoulder at me. There's a fire escape out your bedroom window. When I start shooting, you run Clara. Don't look back. I'm not leaving you, I yelled. You are if you want to live. He roared just as the first man in a tactical jacket rounded the corner into my kitchen. Gunfire erupted, deafening and bright in the tight space. Gabriel fired twice, dropping the first man, but 2 more were right behind him. The air filled with smoke and the shattering of ceramic as my plates exploded. Gabriel grabbed my arm, practically throwing me toward the bedroom. "Move, Clara, now." I ran. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running from judgment or diets or the mirror. I was running for my life with the deadliest man in Chicago, fighting to keep me breathing. The winter air hit me like a physical blow as I shoved the bedroom window open and scrambled onto the rusted iron fire escape. Behind me, the deafening cracks of gunfire echoed through my small apartment, followed by the terrifying sound of bodies hitting the floor. I didn't have a coat. I was still wearing my oversized flannel pajama pants and my chunky knit cardigan, my bare feet slipping on the icy metal grating.